Today's story took place in an apartment in Songpa district, located in the southeastern part of Seoul, South Korea. On the 7th floor of an apartment building in Songpa district, there was a small family of 4 living happily. The husband, Kim Bong-jae, 34 years old, was an employee of a listed company. The wife, Park Ji-ai, 31 years old, was a homemaker. The couple were college sweethearts who married shortly after graduation. They had a 3-year-old son and a 10-month-old daughter. While Kim Bong-jae was the breadwinner, his wife focused on taking care of their home. This clear division of roles brought happiness to the family. However, a horrific incident in 2003 completely upended their peaceful life. At around 7 p.m. on December 29, 2003, Kim Bong-jae returned home from work as usual. Since his wife was typically at home, he was accustomed to not carrying his keys. That day, as always, he arrived at his front door and rang the doorbell. But after waiting for a while without his wife answering, he knocked and called her name several times, but strangely, there was still no response. At this point, he began to feel worried. His wife, Park Ji-ai, was a full-time homemaker who usually stayed home to care for their 2 young children. At this time on most days, she would be waiting for Kim Bong-jae to return home for dinner and rarely went out. Yet today, she wasn't home, and the children seemed to have been taken out as well. Kim Bong-jae then called his wife's close friend, Eung Hyo, to ask if his wife was with her. Eung Hyo, also 31 years old, was Park Ji-ai's high school classmate. After graduation, they reconnected at a class reunion, and Eung Hyo had moved to live near Park Ji-ai's home. Due to their close proximity and friendship, Eung Hyo visited Park Ji-ai's home 3 to 4 times a week. However, Eung Hyo said that Park Ji-ai wasn't at her place, and she didn't know where she was. After hanging up, Eung Hyo immediately left her home and came to Park Ji-ai's apartment. She also tried ringing the doorbell and knocking, but there was no response. Then, she and Kim Bong-jae tried to look inside through a small window in the hallway. Through the gap in the security grill, although Park Ji-ai wasn't visible in the bedroom, they saw her handbag still on the table near the window. Knowing that Park Ji-ai usually kept her keys in her handbag, Eung Hyo and Kim Bong-jae managed to pry open the window and reach through the security grill to grab the bag. They found the keys inside and opened the door. Upon entering the apartment, they found it eerily quiet. After searching, they quickly discovered Park Ji-ai hanging at the bedroom door. An orange clothesline was around her neck, with one end tied to the door, and her face was covered by her long dress pulled up. She showed no signs of life. At this sight, Kim Bong-jae was in shock, not knowing what to do, while Eung Hyo collapsed to the ground. When they regained their composure, they hurriedly searched for the 2 children. Finally, they found the 3-year-old son and 10-month-old daughter in the bedroom closet. The boy's mouth was stuffed with a cloth, and his neck was wrapped with fabric. The girl's head was covered with a tightly tied plastic bag. Both children also showed no signs of life. Seeing this scene, Kim Bong-jae immediately fainted. After regaining consciousness, he quickly called the police. Upon receiving the report, the police immediately arrived, sealed off the area, and began their investigation. In 2003, when the incident occurred, DNA technology in South Korea was not yet advanced, so the police didn't find any useful biological traces. Through examination, they found that the apartment had only one metal door and all windows were tightly closed. The balcony railing showed no signs of damage, and it seemed nearly impossible to break in from the balcony. The food prepared for dinner was still intact, and no valuables in the house were missing. Based on the scene, this is probably not a murder but something Park Ji-ai did to herself. Because if someone had been strangled while conscious, their first reaction would certainly have been to struggle fiercely to save themselves. This would have left traces at the scene, but in reality, there were none, and Park Ji-ai's fingernails were quite clean. The forensic examiner concluded that the 2 children had died from suffocation, with the time of death around 3 p.m. The police initially speculated that Park Ji-ai had killed her 2 children and then did the same herself. Based on this assumption, the police interviewed residents living on the 7th floor of the building. They wanted to find out if anyone had seen Park Ji-ae before the incident occurred and if they had noticed any unusual behavior. A neighbor reported that Park Ji-ae rarely went out except for grocery shopping and was always polite when meeting neighbors. Around 10 a.m. on the day of the incident, she had seen Park Ji-ae returning home with her 2 children from shopping. At that time, the neighbor was about to go out. They greeted each other, and she didn't notice anything unusual. Another neighbor said that due to weak legs, she rarely went out, and her children weren't around. However, Park Ji-ae often showed concern for her, worried about her difficulty going out, so whenever she went shopping, she would buy things for the neighbor. The neighbor said she was very fond of Park Ji-ae, feeling like she was her own daughter. On the day of the incident, this neighbor had been home all day and hadn't heard any unusual sounds from next door. Only in the afternoon did she vaguely hear the sound of a TV program, with the volume a bit loud. However, this wasn't unusual as Park Ji-ae often watched TV with her children at home. When she learned of Park Ji-ae's death, the neighbor felt deeply saddened. Unfortunately, after taking statements from the 7th floor residents, the police still hadn't found any noteworthy clues. However, on the second day after the incident, the forensic examiner conducted a more detailed examination and discovered that the boy hadn't died from suffocation. There were clear wounds on his head and chest, and the cause of death was severe beating. Therefore, the conclusion that Park Ji-ae had killed her children and then did the same herself was shaken. These wounds didn't seem like they were inflicted by a mother. If so, this case was indeed a homicide. But the main door and windows were intact, with no signs of outside intrusion. So how could the perpetrator have committed the crime without damaging the scene and leaving no traces of the victim's struggle? The police then began to question the victim's husband, Kim Bong-jae. He stated that his wife was usually cheerful and optimistic, treated everyone around her well, had no bad habits, had a relatively simple social circle, and was in good mental condition. Therefore, she couldn't have senselessly killed her children in such a cruel manner and then committed suicide. He said that he and his wife were college classmates, had been in love for many years, and married right after graduation. After marriage, they had a son. In February of that year, they had another lovely daughter. To better care for the children, his wife chose to quit her job and stay at home as a homemaker. On the day of the incident, he went to work as usual and didn't feel anything unusual about his wife. It was only when he returned home from work that he discovered the situation, along with his wife's close friend, Eung Hyo. The police then went to Kim Bong-jae's company to investigate. According to his colleagues, on the day of the incident, Kim Bong-jae was at the company all day and didn't go out. A close friend said that Kim Bong-jae had a happy family and was always envied by others. He always treated his wife and children gently and thoughtfully, and sometimes prepared surprises for them. Therefore, he absolutely couldn't have harmed his family so cruelly and had no reason to do so. After the investigation, since Kim Bong-jae had a reliable alibi, the police ruled him out as a suspect. Next, the police examined the surveillance cameras in the building's elevator to look for clues. The time of the victim's death was around 3 p.m., so they focused on observing the period before and after that time. As a result, they quickly discovered a noteworthy clue. The surveillance camera showed that at 1 p.m. that day, a woman around 30 years old entered the building and exited the elevator on the 7th floor. The police immediately recognized the person in the video. It was the woman who had stood beside Kim Bong-jae on the day of the incident, and she was Eung Hyo, the victim's close friend. The police clearly remembered that when they arrived at the scene after receiving the report, they saw Eung Hyo crying incessantly and appearing extremely distressed. Their relationship seemed very good, and her emotions appeared very genuine, so no one suspected her. After obtaining this clue, the police immediately began to question Eung Hyo. She stated that she was 31 years old, was a close friend of the victim Park Ji-ae, and lived in an apartment near the victim's home. They were high school classmates, but during their school years, their relationship was quite normal. After graduation, they lost touch. Until 2 years ago, they met again at a class reunion and began to keep in regular contact, and their relationship grew closer. After that, Eung Hyo moved to live near Park Ji-ae's home, and she often visited Park Ji-ae's home weekly, Faced with the police's question about her appearance on the 7th floor where Park Ji-I lived on the day of the incident, Eung Hyo said that at 1 p.m. that day, she did visit her friend once, but this wasn't unusual as she usually went there 3 to 4 times a week. That day, Eung Hyo just came to chat normally with Park Ji-ae and left after a while. During the interrogation, the police noticed that Eung Hyo frequently made a small gesture of hiding her hands in her sleeves. Although it was winter, it wasn't that cold in the police station, so the police asked Eung Hyo why she was doing this. When hearing this question from the police, Eung Hyo appeared slightly flustered. The police asked her to show her hands, but Eung Hyo hesitated for a long time before slowly extending her hands. The police discovered clear marks on the back of her hand, similar to rope friction. The palm was swollen and red. At this point, the police began to suspect Eung Hyo. They asked her, "Why did you go to Park Ji-ae's home that day, and why is your left hand swollen and red?" Faced with this question from the police, Eung Hyo appeared evasive and didn't answer directly. Later, she said she had slipped in the bathroom while fixing something, but when asked for details, Eung Hyo became flustered and couldn't answer. The police continued to press, asking if she was involved in Park Ji-ae's death. The next answer from Eung Hyo made everyone present feel chills down their spines. After a moment of silence, Eung Hyo seemed to transform into a different person, displaying an eerie smile. She admitted that she was the one who had killed Park Ji-ae and her 2 children. Then, Eung Hyo even said in a challenging tone that the police would never find evidence to convict her. Because according to the law at that time, even if a suspect admitted to the crime without sufficient evidence of the crime, the police couldn't arrest them. If no evidence of the crime was found within 48 hours, the police would have no right to continue detaining the suspect and would have to release them. After interrogating Eung Hyo, the police immediately went to her residence to search. However, there were no signs of repair in the bathroom, clearly showing she had lied to cover up the truth of her crime. In the living room, the police discovered a mineral water bottle cut in half from the middle. Unexpectedly, this small item would become an important clue in the case. At the crime scene, the police had found the clothesline wrapped around Park Ji-ae's neck, with one half hanging on the door. If Park Ji-ae didn't do that to herself, someone must have hung the rope and used the pulley principle to pull it down forcefully, but the top of the door was square-edged, making it difficult to pull and likely to leave friction marks from the clothesline. However, if a cut plastic bottle was placed on top of the door, it would not only make it easier to pull the rope but also leave no marks, perfectly solving this problem. Additionally, in a corner of the living room, the police discovered a hidden diary. When opened, the contents inside made people shudder. In the diary, Eung Hyo had detailed records of what she had done. Even a few days before committing the crime, she had written her crime plan in small letters in the diary and drawn illustrations. In the diary, she had also promised to end Park Ji-ae's life by the end of 2003. The diary recorded that she had visited the victim's home many times to observe before committing the crime. What tools she needed to prepare, how to carry out the act, all details were recorded. It turned out that, although Eung Hyo and Park Ji-ae appeared very close on the surface, the reality was not so. Eung Hyo had wanted to act for a long time, but due to unexpected situations, she had to postpone the time of action. Therefore, the implementation of the plan was delayed. As long as there was a possibility of being discovered, she would immediately stop the action and change the plan, waiting for the next opportunity to arise. From the inception of this terrifying idea to preparation and finally execution, Eung Hyo spent a total of 6 months. During this time, she had 2 opportunities but encountered some errors and had to stop. The first opportunity was 3 months earlier. That afternoon, she went to Park Ji-ae's home intending to carry out her plan. She asked her friend to play a piano piece, planning to take Park Ji-ae's son to the bedroom to commit the crime while Park Ji-ae was engrossed in playing. At this time, Park Ji-ae agreed to her request and immediately played a piece. During a break, Eung Hyo went to Park Ji-ae's son, bent down and whispered in the boy's ear that she had prepared a gift and wanted him to follow her to the bedroom. Hearing about a gift, the boy happily followed Eung Hyo into the room. However, just as she was about to take out the murder weapon, the piano sound suddenly stopped. Eung Hyo quickly halted. It turned out Park Ji-ae's daughter had suddenly started crying loudly, so she stopped playing the piano, picked up her daughter, and began preparing milk to soothe her. Eung Hyo quickly ran out, took the milk bottle, and said she could help. Park Ji-ae, looking at her crying daughter, happily handed the milk bottle to Eung Hyo. She carefully prepared the milk, even testing the temperature on her face before giving it to Park Ji-ae. At this time, the 3-year-old son ran over, hugged Eung Hyo's leg, and asked coyly about the gift she had mentioned. Seeing the boy keep asking, Eung Hyo became a bit flustered. However, she quickly calmed down, sat down, and took out a lollipop she had prepared beforehand from her pocket. Eung Hyo had intended to ask her friend to continue playing the piano for her, but on second thought, she felt this would be too forced. Normally, she wasn't very interested in piano, and repeatedly asking her friend to play might make Park Ji-ae suspicious. Moreover, it was nearing evening, and Kim Bong-jae could return from work at any time. Therefore, the first attempt ended in failure. However, Eung Hyo did not give up her criminal intent and quietly waited for the next opportunity. A month later, the second opportunity arose. That day, Park Ji-ae suddenly sent a message to Eung Hyo saying that her husband had to work overtime that night, so if Eung Hyo was free, she could come over for dinner. Eung Hyo certainly didn't miss this opportunity. When she arrived at Park Ji-ae's home, she planned to take the boy to the bedroom while Park Ji-ae was preparing dinner, because at that time, Park Ji-ae would surely close the kitchen door so she could act without being discovered. After dealing with the boy, she would then proceed with Park Ji-ae. However, just as she thought her plan was perfect, Park Ji-ae said she had to go out to buy ingredients because there weren't enough at home. Hearing this, Eung Hyo offered to go along, but Park Ji-ae declined, asking her to stay and watch the 2 children. Park Ji-ae said she would return as soon as she finished shopping. After Park Ji-ae left, the boy kept clinging to Eung Hyo, asking to play games. Eung Hyo had intended to deal with the boy during this time, but on second thought, when Park Ji-ae returned and couldn't find her son, she would surely become suspicious, and Eung Hyo's next plan would be very difficult to carry out. Therefore, Eung Hyo decided to wait until Park Ji-ae returned before acting. A while later, Park Ji-ae returned home with groceries. But what Eung Hyo didn't expect was that Kim Bong-jae had also returned. It turned out that when Park Ji-ae was coming back, she met her husband downstairs. His company had suddenly canceled overtime, so he had come home early and they could all have dinner together. This was originally a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but Kim Bong-jae's unexpected return caused Eung Hyo's plan to fail once again. The atmosphere at the dinner table among the 3 people was a bit strange, but the naive Park Ji-ae didn't notice anything amiss. She kept serving food to Eung Hyo and thanking her for watching the children. Due to the failure of her plan, Eung Hyo felt somewhat disappointed, but she tried to hide her emotions and not let them show at the dinner table. Finally, dinner ended. After returning home, Eung Hyo furiously threw things around in her living room to release her frustration. Remembering the affectionate scene between Park Ji-ae and Kim Bong-jae at dinner, she grew even more resentful towards them. She morbidly thought that those things should have belonged to her. At this point, Eung Hyo had completely lost her rationality. She swore that she would definitely reclaim what belonged to her. After that, she began to plot more frantically, even recording the detailed steps of her actions in writing and drawings. Eung Hyo was determined that she must end Park Ji-ae's life in her next attempt, but relying solely on her own strength might make it difficult to carry out the plan. After much contemplation, she finally had an idea. She thought about the bedroom door in Park Ji-ae's house, realizing she could use it for leverage. However, she still needed a rope. Then, she remembered the clothesline on Park Ji-ae's balcony. Eung Hyo felt nothing could be more suitable than that clothesline. After preparing everything, Eung Hyo even experimented on her own door, imagining the scene of killing Park Ji-ae. Considering that the top of the door was square-edged, the rope might leave friction marks when pulled, so she began to look for a solution, trying many methods but not being satisfied with any. By chance, Eung Hyo saw a water bottle on the table and had an idea. She took scissors and cut the bottle in half, then placed half of it on top of the door. At this point, the bottle fit perfectly with the door. To verify her hypothesis, she experimented and indeed, the half bottle didn't fall off the door. Moreover, the smooth surface of the bottle made it easier to pull the rope. After completing all preparatory stages, on December 29, 2003, Eung Hyo killed Park Ji-ae and her 2 children. She believed she had committed the crime very carefully and that no one could detect any flaws. However, she couldn't have imagined that the half-plastic bottle would become the breakthrough in the case. After obtaining evidence, the police immediately arrested the suspect Eung Hyo. Knowing she couldn't escape punishment, Eung Hyo quickly admitted to her crime and explained why she did it. 2 years before the incident occurred, Eung Hyo and Park Ji-ae had met again at a class reunion. Eung Hyo had actively contacted Park Ji-ae and soon after moved to live near her. At that time, Eung Hyo was still single, while Park Ji-ae was married and had an outstanding husband. However, Eung Hyo always felt she was much better than Park Ji-ae. During school, her academic performance had always been better than Park Ji-ae's, and she had consistently ranked at the top in exams. In Eung Hyo's mind, she should have had a better life than Park Ji-ae. But looking at herself, she had nothing. No good job, no boyfriend, just loneliness. Eung Hyo couldn't accept that a classmate with lower academic achievements could have such a happy and perfect family. This severely damaged her self-esteem. From this, she developed an intense jealousy towards Park Ji-ae. Eung Hyo felt her life wasn't going as she wished, so she didn't want to see others living happily either. Gradually, she developed feelings for Park Ji-ae's husband, Kim Bong-jae, and began to intentionally approach him. She thought she was not only more beautiful than Park Ji-ae, but also much more capable. So why could Park Ji-ae have him while she couldn't? Later, Eung Hyo sent a message to Kim Bong-jae saying, "It's a pity that such an excellent man like you got married so early." In her diary, she even wrote, "If I unfortunately pass away, I hope I can leave all my assets to my best friend's husband." Initially, Kim Bong-jae felt very uncomfortable with Eung Hyo's forwardness and considered her an improper woman. He even reminded his wife to have less contact with her. But gradually, Kim Bong-jae began to feel that Eung Hyo was a very thoughtful woman. Whenever he was in a bad mood, she could always notice promptly and comfort him. As a result, not long after, Kim Bong-jae also developed feelings for Eung Hyo. By January 2003, Park Ji-ae had accidentally discovered an ambiguous message between the two on her husband's phone, so she began to feel suspicious. However, besides this, there was no other evidence, so she didn't confront them about it, but only secretly harbored suspicions and monitored the situation. After a while, noticing that Kim Bong-jae and Eung Hyo kept their distance, Park Ji-ae stopped suspecting. She thought she had misunderstood her best friend. During this time, Eung Hyo still came to Park Ji-ae's home 3 to 4 times a week, and the two remained very close. However, the seed of jealousy didn't disappear from Eung Hyo's mind. On the contrary, it germinated and grew stronger. She felt that Park Ji-ae's existence was a barrier to her happiness. Driven by this morbid psychology, she began to prepare to eliminate Park Ji-ae. After all preparations were complete, Eung Hyo began to act. On the day of the incident, December 29, 2003, Kim Bong-jae had left home early for work. Eung Hyo arrived at Park Ji-ae's home at 1 p.m. At this time, Park Ji-ae was holding her 10-month-old daughter and watching TV with her 3-year-old son. When he saw Eung Hyo, the boy felt very happy and ran to hug her, calling her auntie. Eung Hyo sat down and said to the boy, "Let's go to the room and prepare a surprise performance for your mom, okay?" The boy happily agreed. Then Eung Hyo turned up the TV volume to maximum and told Park Ji-ae this was just so she wouldn't discover the surprise. After that, she led the boy into the bedroom. When she took the boy into the bedroom, Eung Hyo immediately locked the door, then used a piece of cloth to strangle the boy to death. During this process, she even kicked the boy's body several times. Afterward, she hid the boy's body in the wardrobe and closed the door. Half an hour later, Eung Hyo calmly walked out of the bedroom. She told Park Ji-ae that her son had prepared a surprise performance in the room and invited her to come and see, but she had to be blindfolded. Faced with her best friend's request, Park Ji-ae was completely unsuspecting. She wore a long dress and carried her daughter into the room. Eung Hyo immediately pulled Park Ji-ae's dress up to cover her head, telling her not to peek. When they reached the bedroom door, Eung Hyo asked Park Ji-ae to turn her back to the door. Then, Eung Hyo quickly took the orange clothesline from the balcony, tied it into a noose, and put it around Park Ji-ae's neck. She then took out the half-plastic bottle she had prepared earlier, opened the bedroom door, and pulled Park Ji-ae up. Perhaps due to maternal instinct, during this process, Park Ji-ae was worried about the daughter she was holding falling to the ground, so she couldn't resist strongly. After killing Park Ji-ae, Eung Hyo was still not satisfied. She then turned her attention to the infant who was still nursing. Finally, Eung Hyo completed her entire criminal plan. Before leaving, she took away the murder weapon, the plastic bottle, and Park Ji-ae's handbag. After locking the door, she put the victim's house key in the handbag, opened the bag's zipper, then reached through the security window in the hallway and placed the handbag with the key on the table near the window. Then she closed the window and hurriedly left. The purpose was to create a scenario where no one had broken into the house. Eung Hyo's cruel method of committing the crime was truly horrifying. After being arrested, the psychological expert's assessment showed that she suffered from severe depression and paranoia. Therefore, her thoughts and behaviors were very extreme. 1 year after the incident occurred, the South Korean Supreme Court opened a trial to Judge Eung Hyo, declaring her guilty of premeditated murder and requesting the death penalty. At the court, the defense lawyer argued that the defendant Eung Hyo had always emphasized that she suffered from depression and paranoia. She had also voluntarily confessed to the process and motives of her crime. Eung Hyo's life had been tragic. Her father died early, and before his death, he had an affair. Afterward, she lived with her mother in difficult circumstances, but no one really cared about her. However, her classmates seemed to have good lives. Therefore, she felt the world was completely unfair to her. Despite trying very hard, at over 30 years old, she was still unmarried, living in poverty, and could only stay in a simple rented apartment. She had been under great pressure both psychologically and financially. As a result, the jealousy, inferiority, and anger accumulated over many years suddenly exploded, causing her to develop evil intentions. However, the court held that the defendant showed no genuine remorse or repentance, so she should have been sentenced to death. Nevertheless, considering that Eung Hyo suffered from mental illness, the court finally decided to sentence her to life imprisonment. This verdict caused many people to feel indignant. They believed that Eung Hyo's method of committing the crime was too cruel and completely undeserving of legal leniency. At the trial, Kim Bong-jae appeared very distressed. He felt guilty towards his wife, regretted his infidelity, and felt he didn't deserve forgiveness. Due to his unfaithfulness, he had indirectly caused this tragedy. However, it was all too late. For the rest of his life, Kim Bong-jae would likely have to live with regret and remorse. 2 years after the incident occurred, Eung Hyo appealed to the Supreme Court and submitted a petition for sentence reduction, along with a letter of remorse. However, the Supreme Court rejected the appeal and upheld the original sentence. 20 years have passed since the incident occurred, and Eung Hyo is still paying the price for the crime she committed. However, the pain of the victim's family perhaps can never be erased. This story reminds us that happiness is not a competition. Instead of comparing ourselves to others, we should cherish what we have and strive to become the best version of ourselves. Thank you for watching today's video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support our channel. We'll see you in the next video.